Hey everyone, the Super Vader for 100 here, back for another retro review, and this time this is my very first comic book review on this channel. This is my review of Eternal Champions issues 19 through, I think 19 through 24, 19 through 24, and the follow-up comic, Larson's Revenge issues 3740 of the much larger Sonic the comic book series that ran in the early 90s. I've been trying to read this comic, The Eternal Champions. I've been trying to read this comic for about 7 to 8 years. I first heard about this comic about around 2008 or 2009 when I first did research on the Eternal Champions franchise, and happy I finally got to read the comic. I've read the comic several times now. I've read the comic several times and I finally got to read the comic thanks to a YouTube user called Mortal Kombat Comics who uploads video game based comics such as Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, Eternal Champions, and the Injustice series, and a couple of other horror series that I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment right now. But thanks to him, Um, I finally got to read this awesome comic, and both comics were awesome. With the first comic, which was issues 19 through 24, being my favorite of the two. And I'm going to start off with issues 19 through 24. Issues 19 through 24 feature the Eternal Champions stopping um stopping Nakano, infiltrating Nakano Industries and stopping Nakano from unlocking the bio key technology to save the future. For if Nakano unlocks the bio key technology, it will be the end of mankind, according to the dialogue of the main character and most popular character from the Eternal Champions fighting game, Shadow Yamato, who is pretty much the unofficial leader of the Eternal Champions of the Eternal who was the unofficial leader of the Eternal Champions, and unofficially pretty much the main character of the franchise, because she was the most popular Eternal champion. So popular, her and um Larson um spawned their own spin-off alternate world video games where they did not die in 1993. Well, like I said, this comic features her leading a team of um of Blade, Jonathan Blade, Rax Carswell, Larson, Trident, Xavier, Midnight, Slash, and Jetta Marks on a mission to stop Nakano from unlocking the bio key technology. In this particular comic, before I get back to the story, awesome, awesome in-depth story, and awesome artwork. The only thing I don't like about this comic, or both of these comics, is that, but I is the lack of action. Is the lack of action. There's not a lot of action for a comic book that was based on a fighting game. There really isn't a lot of action. They just fight a couple of guards. Not even in the last part of the comic, which I'm about to get to in a minute. The last part of the comic is a tournament. The last part of the comic. There are four parts to this comic book. There are four parts to this comic book, and there isn't much action. But when there is action, it is good. Full of lots of just like in the video game, the characters taken from Art of Fighting, they have the ability to taunt their opponent. They have the ability to taunt their opponent, and they taunt and make jokes as they're doing their task. That's one feature I loved in the comics. That's one feature I love in the comics, because that was something in the video game. I like how they video game, and throughout the comics they reference the video game a lot. This comic book actually appears to be like sort of like a sequel to the video game, and it sucks that this was only two comics. I would love to see more comics after this, because both comics hint at the chance of a sequel, and hint at more issues. And this was a series that could have like went on for a long time, but like Sega in the early 90s, they called it quit and discontinued this franchise to support their Virtua Fighter franchise, which I like Virtua Fighter, but that was nowhere near as good as this right here. Virtua Fighter was nowhere near as good as this. Um, so the so like I said, the art continues. The Eternal Champions, after defeating the Kano's guards, Blade, Shadow, and I think Slash get captured, and it's up to the remaining champions: Rax, Jetamax, Trident, 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 and Xavier and Midnight to and Larson to to free them, and they end up fighting in an arena called the Cyberdome, which this appears to be Rax's stage, because there are other cyber fighters just like him. There are other cyber fighters just like him. Actually, by breaking in, they accidentally took the place of the original cyber fighters, of the original cyber fighters, and they fight in a tournament where they pretend to hurt each other, and I forgot what happens. I forgot. I just can't explain what happens next because the story was kind of hard to follow. Um, after after they free Shadow, Blade, and what's his name, they kick some butt, and they prevent Nakano from developing the bio key for unlocking the bio key technology. In the last issue, Nakano himself, he shows up mysteriously alive, only now he's in a motorized wheelchair. He's now in a motorized wheelchair building a new weapon, and it hints at a and the comic immediately hints at a sequel. In the next comics, um which was issues 37 through 40, the Eternal Champions, this one only involves Larson and Shadow Yamato sent by the Eternal Champion himself to get revenge on the get revenge on to take down the crime bo- the crime boss who killed him in the first place, and that's pretty much what it is. Like I said, I enjoyed the first comic better because it had various aspects of the games, and it involved all of the Eternal Champions. But this comic was good too. Larson in the video games was actually, like I said, story wise I liked him, but when it came to gameplay, he was actually one of my least favorite characters in the game. Here you get to see, here and in the previous comic you get to see a different side of him and more to him. So like I said, gameplay wise he was my least favorite character, but story wise this is an awesome character. You could have done more with this character and all the characters here. This was awesome seeing him and Shadow team up. This comic was pretty much them teaming up and fighting the crime boss, and at the end of the issue, Shadow was there to retrieve some papers that Larson refused to give to her at the end of the comic. And at the end of the comic, after they saved the world, the papers were somehow evidence to prove of his innocence, and something that would send all the crime bosses to jail. It was something like that. And after that issue was over, they're called by the Eternal Champions on another mission. Just like the previous comic, like I said, awesome artwork. It actually looks like the time. This is supposed to be the 20s. It actually looks like the time it's set in. The artwork, it's not as modern. Is not as modern looking as the last arc was, and this arc right here, this arc right here, just like the last one. This has a little bit more action, but it doesn't have a lot of action. It doesn't have a lot of action. It doesn't have a lot of action, which is my only problem with this arc. And my only other problem with this arc was that the other Eternal Champions, the other Eternal Champions weren't involved in this arc. But then, did they really need to be involved? Because I mean, they were just fighting mobsters in this arc, whereas in the last one they were fighting guys with guns and cyber warriors. So yeah, like I said, the only other problem I have was that there wasn't more. I would like a follow up to this or a remake with even better arc and more action sequences to the level of Marvel and DC comics. But this was a great comic book series right here. Finally glad I got to watch. Finally glad I got to read and review both comics. All right, Super Vader out.